You know, people always say family comes first. They say blood is thicker than water, that no matter what, you can trust your own. And for a long time, I believed that. I lived by it. Before I continue the story, kindly subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. My sister, she was my world. I was the big brother who thought my only duty in life was to make sure she had everything she needed, even if it meant cutting pieces off my own soul. I worked long hours, sometimes 16-hour shifts, doing whatever job I could find. Day in, day out, sweat dripping down my back, my palms rough and scarred from endless labor. Every paycheck I earned, it went straight into her hands. Her rent, her bills, her groceries, her tuition fees. And whenever she needed more, I found a way. I told myself I wasn't just helping her survive, I was helping her thrive. And trust me, it wasn't easy. There were nights I went to bed hungry because my wallet was empty, but at least I could say, she won't suffer while I'm alive. That thought alone gave me strength. But here's the thing about sacrifice, when it's genuine, you don't even think about keeping score. I never sat down to calculate how much I had given. I didn't need to. To me, her happiness was worth every penny. I thought I was building something with her, a future where she'd look back and say, my brother believed in me when no one else did. I even went as far as making investments in her name. Yeah, imagine that. Instead of putting my savings under my name, I poured them into opportunities one thought would secure her future. I believed if I laid the foundation, she could rise higher than I ever could. And that? That would be my greatest achievement. But let me paint you the scene, because this is where the cracks began to show. It was a regular afternoon. I had come home early from work, exhausted, clothes stained, hands aching. I walked into the house and heard laughter coming from her room. At first, I smiled. I thought, good, she's happy. That's all that mattered to me. But then, as I got closer, I caught pieces of a conversation. Her voice, sharp with amusement, carrying through the slightly open door. She was talking to her friends. And I'll never forget her words. She said, my brother's such a fool. He works like a donkey, wasting all his money on me. Imagine, instead of investing his savings into something that'll make him real money, he throws it away paying my bills. Honestly, I don't even have to lift a finger, he does it all. What an idiot. The room erupted in laughter. Her friends. Her voice. My sister, my own blood, mocking me as if I was nothing but her personal clown. I froze. It felt like my chest had been ripped open, like the air had been sucked out of the room. And for a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I just stood there, the words echoing in my skull over and over again, what a fool, what a fool, what a fool. Tell me, what do you do when the very person you've been breaking yourself for spits on your sacrifice? When they see your love as weakness, when your loyalty is treated like stupidity? I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound, because if I stepped in that room right then, I don't know what I might have done. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst out of my chest. I walked outside, sat down on the steps, and stared at the sky. And that's when the truth hit me. All this time, I thought I was the hero in her story. I thought I was her protector, her savior. But to her, I was just a fool with deep pockets and no brains. Nothing more. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over again. Each replay cut deeper, carving out the last bits of blind loyalty left in me. I felt betrayed in a way I can't fully explain. Betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from family? That kind of pain, it digs into your bones. And there, in the darkness, I made a vow. I swore I would never be used like that again. I swore I would never pour my sweat, my time, my heart into someone who laughed behind my back. She thought I was a fool. Fine. She was about to see just how dangerous a fool can be when he wakes up. That was the night I decided. I would take everything back. Every dime, every investment, every ounce of effort I had poured into her life. Quietly. Silently. Without her even realizing it, until it was too late. And when the time came, when she needed me the most, she would find nothing. Just the cold echo of the words she once spat at her friends, "What a fool." Because if I was a fool before, I was done playing that role now. You know, there's a moment in every man's life when the world tilts. When what you thought was solid ground suddenly crumbles beneath your feet. For me, that moment came the day I heard my sister's voice, mocking, sharp, dripping with scorn, as she told her friends I was nothing but a fool. I didn't confront her that day. No. I couldn't. I was too stunned, too hollow inside. But the words never left me. They followed me everywhere, to work, to the streets, even in my sleep. It was like a ghost whispering in my ear, reminding me over and over, "You're a fool. You're a fool." And I started to notice things I had ignored before. The way she never said thank you anymore. The way she rolled her eyes when I reminded her to be careful with money. The late-night outings, the expensive clothes, the endless stream of emergencies that drained my pockets. I realized, she never saw me as a brother. To her, I was a bank. A safety net. Nothing more. And when you start seeing the truth, it's like pulling a mask off a face you thought you knew. What stares back at you is ugly. But listen, I'm not the kind of man who lashes out blindly. No. If I was going to respond, I had to be patient. Calculated. If she thought I was a fool, I was going to let her keep thinking that. I was going to let her laugh, let her mock, let her enjoy her little world, all while I worked silently in the shadows. So here's what I did. Every investment I had put under her name, every account, every certificate, every property tied to her future, I started pulling it back. Quietly. Carefully. Piece by piece, like removing bricks from the foundation of a house. At first, I was scared. I thought she'd notice, thought she'd question it. But she didn't. She was too busy living off the comfort I had built for her. Too blind to see the walls collapsing around her. And here's where it gets interesting. Instead of putting those investments back into my own name, I transferred them under someone else. Someone new. Now, you might think that's reckless, maybe even stupid. But when blood betrays you, your whole perspective changes. My sister, who had known me all my life, had no respect for me. But this new friend I had, someone I'd only known for 3 weeks, showed me more loyalty in that short time than she ever had. 3 weeks. Imagine that. 3 weeks was all it took for a stranger to prove more trustworthy than my own blood. That thought alone was both terrifying and liberating. So I made my move. Signed everything over, changed every detail, cut every string that tied her future to my sweat. And let me tell you, the feeling was intoxicating. Like I was finally reclaiming pieces of myself she had stolen. For the first time in years, I felt free. But here's the part that kept me up at night. What if my gamble failed? What if this new friend betrayed me too? I was risking everything, after all. Every cent, every hour of sacrifice. And yet, deep down, I knew, it couldn't be worse than watching my sister laugh at my pain. Because betrayal from blood? That's a poison that never leaves you. I remember sitting in my tiny room one night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her words again. He doesn't know what to do with his money. He's a fool, and I started to smile. A cold, bitter smile. Because soon, she would learn. She would wake up one day, stretch her arms, and realize the safety net she thought would always be there had vanished. And when she reached out for me, when she cried and begged, she would find nothing. Just silence. I didn't tell her what I was doing. I didn't argue with her. I didn't confront her. That would have been too easy, too merciful. Instead, I chose silence. Silence is powerful, you know. Silence gives your enemy enough rope to hang themselves. So I played the fool. I kept paying some small bills here and there, kept showing up with a smile, kept letting her think she was winning. All while I was building a new life for myself behind the curtain. Every time she laughed with her friends, every time she rolled her eyes at me, I said nothing. But inside, I was counting down. One day less of her reign. One day closer to her fall. And trust me, when you've been betrayed like that, waiting becomes a kind of pleasure. Watching the storm build, knowing you're the one who controls it, is sweeter than any immediate revenge. Because revenge isn't about shouting. It isn't about anger. No, real revenge is about patience. It's about letting the knife sink in slowly, so deep they don't even realize they're bleeding until it's far too late. And that's exactly what I was doing. So, to everyone watching this right now, let me tell you, if someone ever mocks your sacrifice, if they ever spit on your loyalty, don't rush. Don't waste your time yelling or proving yourself. Just smile. Be silent. And build your revenge in the shadows. Because when the day of reckoning comes, the silence will be deafening. And for my sister, that day was coming sooner than she could ever imagine. You ever play a game of chess? The beauty of chess isn't in the loud moves, it's in the quiet ones. The ones your opponent doesn't notice until it's too late. That's exactly how I started treating my life after that night. I wasn't just her brother anymore. I was her silent opponent. I began moving my pieces slowly. Quietly. One investment here, one property there. I would walk into the bank, sign a few documents, smile politely, and walk out, lighter in spirit, heavier in control. Each signature felt like pulling a thread from a web she didn't even know was unraveling. The crazy part? She never suspected a thing. She was too busy enjoying the comforts I had created. Fancy outings with friends, late-night shopping trips, designer clothes that screamed wealth but whispered ignorance. She thought the game was hers. She thought I was still her safety net. And I let her believe it. But behind the scenes, I was rewriting the script. You see, every cent I pulled back, I didn't just stash it under my name. No. That would have been too predictable. Too easy to trace. Instead, I placed it all under the name of someone new, a friend I had barely known for 3 weeks. Now, I know what you're thinking, why risk everything on a stranger? And trust me, I asked myself the same question 100 times. But here's the truth, when family betrays you, your definition of trust changes. Blood had already proven itself worthless. So why not gamble on a stranger who, in just 3 weeks, had shown me more respect, more loyalty, than my own sister ever had? And every time I signed over another piece of my sweat and blood into his name, I felt liberated. Like I was cutting invisible chains. But let me tell you, there were nights I doubted myself. Nights when fear crept in, whispering, what if this new friend betrays you too? What if you're making the same mistake again? I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with that question. Then I'd remember her voice, laughing with her friends, calling me a fool, and suddenly, the fear turned into fuel. Because whatever happened, it couldn't be worse than living as her punchline. So I kept going. Piece by piece, I drained her future. The stocks. Gone. The certificates. Transferred. The little business savings. Redirected. She was living on borrowed time, and she didn't even know it. And here's the part that still sends shivers down my spine, I started to enjoy it. The secrecy. The power. The control. For years, I had been the giver, the provider, the fool in her story. But now, I was the writer of a new ending. An ending she couldn't see coming. One evening, she walked past me, bragging on the phone to a friend about a trip she was planning. She laughed, saying, "Don't worry, my brother's got it covered. He always does." I looked at her, smiling, confident, dripping with arrogance, and I almost laughed myself. Because little did she know, the brother she was mocking had already cut the ropes. She was dangling over a cliff, and the only thing holding her up was an illusion. And illusions don't last forever. To the outside world, I played the same role. The quiet, supportive brother. The fool. I still paid for the little things here and there, small bills, groceries, enough to keep the mask in place. But behind the mask, I was already gone. Do you know what's more terrifying than an enemy who attacks you openly? An enemy who smiles in your face while plotting your downfall in silence. That's who I had become. And the best part? She had no clue. But deep down, I wasn't just pulling away from her financially. No. I was pulling away emotionally too. Each withdrawal wasn't just money leaving her name, it was me reclaiming pieces of myself. My dignity. My pride. My worth. By the time I was done, she was standing on a hollow foundation. One push, one gust of wind, and her whole world would come crashing down. And I promised myself this, when that day came, when she looked around and realized the empire she thought I built for her was nothing but dust, I wouldn't gloat. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't even explain. No. I would just stand there, silent, cold, untouchable, while she realized the truth on her own. Because sometimes, the most brutal revenge isn't in what you do. It's in what you refuse to do. And soon enough, she was going to find out what that felt like. They say time heals all wounds. I disagree. Time doesn't heal betrayal, it sharpens it. It turns the sting into fire, the fire into ice, and the ice into a weapon. Years passed after I made my silent move. And during those years, life revealed its true colors. For me, things began to change. Slowly, steadily, everything I had secured under my friend's name began to grow. Investments matured, businesses expanded, opportunities opened. For the first time in my life, I wasn't struggling. I wasn't chasing after scraps, breaking my back just to survive. No. I was building something real, a future that had my sweat on it but not my sister's shadow. But for her, the story was different. At first, she didn't notice. She kept living the same way, careless, extravagant, blind. Nights out with friends, new clothes every week, vacations she couldn't afford but assumed I would cover. And I let her. I wanted her to keep floating in that illusion for as long as possible. But illusions don't last forever. It started small. She needed money for something urgent, but when she checked, one of her investments had mysteriously dried up. She came to me, panicked. I shrugged, told her I didn't know what happened, and handed her just enough to keep her calm. She laughed it off, said, "These banks are unreliable," and went on with her life. Then another account vanished. And another. Slowly, her safety net began to unravel. Her friends, the same ones who used to laugh with her, started to drift away. The parties grew fewer, the invitations stopped coming. And when the money was truly gone, the laughter stopped too. I watched it all happen from a distance. Not with joy, not with pity, but with a cold, calculated silence. This was the storm I had been waiting for. The house of cards collapsing in on itself. She tried to hustle. Tried to start small businesses, begged old contacts for loans, even reached out to some of the same friends who used to mock me with her. But doors that once swung wide open slammed shut in her face. Money has a way of testing loyalty, and when it disappears, so do the people who claimed they'd always be there. And then came the debts. Oh, the debts. She owed landlords, shops, and people I didn't even know existed. Her name, once tied to luxury and ease, was now whispered with shame. She was no longer the girl with everything, she was the woman who had lost it all. And through it all, she never came to me. Not yet. Pride is funny like that. It makes you hold out even when the ground beneath you is crumbling. She probably thought she could fix it herself. Probably thought she'd find another fool to carry her burdens. But no one came. Meanwhile, my own life had transformed. The businesses I had shifted under my friend's name. They thrived. And eventually, my friend, loyal and grateful, returned the name back to me. Every investment, every asset, every ounce of value I had reclaimed was secured under my identity. It was like the universe itself was rewarding me for finally choosing myself over blind loyalty. I had wealth now. Not flashy, not loud, but steady. Real. The kind of wealth that doesn't fade when the party ends. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the day would come when she'd have no choice but to face me. And then it happened. One evening, I heard a knock at my door. A soft, hesitant knock, not the confident bangs of someone entitled, but the trembling tap of someone desperate. I opened the door, and there she was. My sister. But not the sister I remembered. No. This woman standing before me was broken. Her eyes swollen from crying, her clothes faded, her hair messy. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of the world had pressed her into the ground. And when she saw me, she broke. Tears spilled down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, help me." In that moment, time froze. All the memories rushed back, the years of sacrifice, the nights I went hungry so she could eat, the laughter behind my back, the words that branded me a fool. And now here she was. Begging. Desperate. Weak. I should have felt joy. I should have felt triumphant. But what I felt instead was something colder. Something sharper. Because revenge isn't about shouting, "I told you so." No. Real revenge is when you don't have to say anything at all. When your silence speaks louder than any words ever could. I looked at her, and I realized, the storm I had been waiting for had finally arrived. And I was the calm at the center of it. I'll never forget that night. The knock on my door was soft, weak, almost like she was afraid the sound alone would break her. When I opened it and saw her standing there, for a second, I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the sister I once broke my back for. No, this was a hollow version of her, drained eyes, trembling hands, clothes that looked borrowed, not owned. The arrogance, the pride, the sharp tongue, all of it had been burned away by life. And in that moment, standing at my door, she didn't look like someone who once mocked me. She looked like someone begging the world not to swallow her whole. Her voice cracked when she spoke, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, brother. I need your help." For a second, I swear my chest tightened. Blood doesn't stop being blood, no matter how poisoned it becomes. A part of me wanted to remember the good times, the childhood moments, the laughter we once shared. But then, like a knife, her words from years ago cut through the fog. "He's such a fool. Wasting his money on me. What an idiot." And just like that, the sympathy died. I stepped aside, letting her in. She collapsed on the couch like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She started talking fast, her words tumbling over themselves, stories of debts, betrayals, friends who had vanished, opportunities that had turned to dust. She cried, she begged, she swore she had changed. I sat there, silent. Just listening. Do you know the power of silence? When someone is desperate, silence becomes heavier than any insult. It forces them to hear themselves, to confront the echo of their own mistakes. And that's exactly what I gave her, silence. At one point, she reached for my hand, clutching it like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. "You're all I have left," she whispered. But those words, they weren't healing. They were hollow. Because she hadn't seen me as all she had when the money was flowing, when her friends laughed at my expense, when she called me a fool. No. I was only valuable now because her world had collapsed. So I pulled my hand back. Slowly. Calmly. Her eyes widened, tears spilling faster as she fell to her knees on the floor. "Please. I know I was wrong. I should never have said those things. I should never have treated you like that. But you're my brother. Please, just this once, help me. And I'll be honest with you, I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream at her, to throw every memory of betrayal in her face. I wanted her to feel the rage that had burned in me for years. But then I realized, no. That would be too easy. Too merciful. The real punishment wasn't in rage. It was in restraint. So I stood up. Walked to the door. And without a single word, I opened it. The message was clear: leave. She froze, staring at me like her world had just ended all over again. Please. Don't do this, she whispered. But I didn't answer. I didn't shout. I didn't explain. I just stared back, cold, silent, immovable. And after a long moment, she rose to her feet, shoulders shaking, tears streaming, and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than any explosion. That was it. She was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, letting the silence settle in. And the strangest part? I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel relief. I felt nothing. Because revenge isn't about happiness. It isn't about filling the hole they left in you. No. Revenge is about balance. It's about letting them drown in the weight of their own actions while you stand untouched, untouchable. And that night, as she walked away from my door with nothing, I knew the scales had finally evened. She once called me a fool. But in the end, who was left standing strong? Who was left with everything, while she had nothing? The fool. Or the sister who mocked him? I'll let you answer that. But remember this, sometimes the coldest revenge isn't fire. It's ice. Not in what you do, but in what you refuse to do. Not in words, but in silence. And my silence that night, was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. And that, is how silence became my loudest revenge. But let me ask you this, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have forgiven her? I want to hear your thoughts, drop them in the comments below. And if this story sent chills down your spine, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe for more stories like this, because trust me, this is only the beginning. Turn on that notification bell, you don't want to miss what comes next.